Lila, don't play with your food, Nathan scolded, his eyes narrowing at our 10-year-old daughter. I tensed, bracing for another evening filled with his criticism. As I opened my mouth to defend Lila, she abruptly pushed her plate aside, the contents spilling onto the pristine tablecloth. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." Nathan slammed his fist on the table, making us both flinch. "How many times have I told you? We don't waste food in this household." My heart raced as his face reddened, the vein on his forehead pulsing. I knew that look all too well, the precursor to his rage. Before I could intervene, Lila's small hand reached out and knocked over Nathan's prized baseball, signed by Babe Ruth himself. It rolled off the table and hit the floor with a sickening thud. Time seemed to freeze as Nathan's eyes widened in disbelief. He turned his glare towards Lila, who shrank in her chair. "You little brat! Do you have any idea how much that's worth?" As he rose from his seat, I placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Nathan, please. It was an accident." He shrugged me off, his attention fixated on our daughter. "This is unacceptable behavior, Lila. You need to learn some respect." Lila's lips quivered and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm really sorry." To my horror, Nathan reached for his belt, and I knew what would come next. It was a pattern I'd witnessed countless times, his escalating rage followed by physical punishment under the guise of discipline. But this time, something shifted in Lila's eyes. Her tears stopped, and she straightened her back, her gaze locking with Nathan's. "No, Daddy. I won't let you hurt Mommy anymore." My breath caught in my throat as Lila's words hung in the air like a heavy curtain, lifting to reveal the ugly truth I'd been denying for years. Nathan froze, his face contorted in rage and confusion. "What did you say?" Lila turned to me, her expression a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Mommy, I've seen the way he treats you, the yelling, the pushing, the bruises you try to hide. It's not right." My carefully constructed facade crumbled as tears spilled down my cheeks. All the times I'd made excuses, all the lies I'd told myself and others, they unraveled in that single heart-wrenching moment. Nathan's face drained of color as he stared at us, his mouth agape. For once, he was speechless, stripped of his control and power. In that surreal silence, I realized that my sweet, brave daughter had given me the strength I'd been lacking all these years. The strength to face the truth, to protect her, and to break free from the cycle of abuse that had become my life. As I wrapped my arms around Lila, holding her close, I knew our lives would never be the same. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. A hope for a future free from fear and oppression. A future where love triumphed over violence. The shattered remains of Nathan's prized baseball lay scattered on the floor, a fitting metaphor for the illusion that had just been destroyed. And in that moment, I vowed to never let anyone control or diminish me again. The aftermath of that fateful dinner was like a bomb going off in our household. The silence that followed Lila's revelation was deafening, broken only by the occasional clatter as Nathan paced back and forth, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "How dare you?" he seethed, shooting daggers at Lila with his eyes. "How dare you disrespect me like this in my own home?" Lila flinched, but held her ground. "I'm sorry, Daddy, but I won't let you hurt Mommy anymore." Nathan whirled to face me, his face contorted with rage. "Is this true, Janelle? Have you been filling her head with lies about me?" I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment I dreaded for years, the confrontation that could either set me free or trap me further in his web of control. "No, Nathan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Lila's telling the truth. I can't pretend anymore." His eyes narrowed, and he took a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. "Pretend? You think this is some kind of game?" Before he could advance further, Lila stepped between us, her small frame trembling but her eyes blazing with determination. "Don't you touch her!" Nathan recoiled as if struck, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. "How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little brat!" "Don't call her that!" I snapped, surprising even myself with the force of my words. Nathan's head whipped towards me, and for a moment I thought he might strike me, but something in my defiance seemed to give him pause. "This is your doing, Janelle," he hissed. "You've turned my own daughter against me." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "No, Nathan, I've done nothing but endure your rage and abuse for far too long. Lila's just the one brave enough to see the truth." His face reddened, and he opened his mouth to retort, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I'm done, Nathan. I'm done living in fear, walking on eggshells around you, making excuses for your behavior. It stops now." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his features, and for the first time I saw a crack in his armor of control. "You can't be serious," he scoffed. But his words lacked their usual conviction. "I've never been more serious in my life," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "This ends tonight." Nathan's gaze darted between Lila and me, and I could see the realization setting in. The years of manipulation and mind games were unraveling before his very eyes. "You'll regret this," he spat, his words laced with venom. "You won't have a penny to your name. I'll make sure of it." I squared my shoulders, emboldened by a newfound strength I hadn't felt in years. "I don't care about your money, Nathan. All I care about is getting away from you and your abuse." His eyes widened, and for a moment I thought he might strike out in desperation. But Lila's unwavering stance seemed to give him pause, and he simply shook his head in disbelief. "Fine," he growled. "Get out, then. See how far you get without me." With those words, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Lila and me standing amidst the wreckage of our former lives. As I pulled my daughter into a tight embrace, tears of relief and determination streamed down my face. The facade had crumbled, and there was no turning back now. It was time to break free, no matter what it took. In the days following my confrontation with Nathan, the atmosphere in our home was thick with tension. He would often storm out without a word, returning late at night reeking of alcohol. Lila and I tiptoed around him, never knowing when his dormant rage might erupt. It was during this tumultuous time that I reconnected with an old friend, Mariah. We had drifted apart after I married Nathan, his controlling nature slowly isolating me from my support system. But when I finally found the courage to open up to Mariah about the truth of my marriage, she was a pillar of strength. "Janelle, you have to get out of there," she urged, her voice laced with concern over the video call. "What he's doing is abuse, plain and simple." I nodded, blinking back tears. "I know, but it's not that simple. He's threatened to take everything from me if I leave, including Lila." Mariah's eyes hardened with resolve. "Over my dead body. We'll find a way, Janelle. You and Lila deserve so much better than this." Her unwavering support was like a lifeline, giving me the courage to take the first tentative steps towards freedom. With Mariah's help, I began documenting every instance of Nathan's abuse, keeping a meticulous record of his outbursts, threats, and the rare but horrifying physical altercations. I started squirreling away what little money I could, opening a secret bank account in preparation for my eventual escape. Meanwhile, Lila and I began subtly undermining Nathan's control in small ways. We would accidentally leave doors unlocked, misplace his belongings, and question his decisions in front of others. It was a dangerous game, but one that slowly chipped away at his perceived dominance. "What's wrong with you two?" he would rage, his face contorted in fury. "Are you trying to make me look like a fool?" "Of course not, dear," I would reply, feigning innocence. "We're just a bit forgetful sometimes." Lila would nod solemnly, her big eyes guileless. Nathan would fume, his jaw clenched, but he could never quite catch us in an outright act of defiance. As the weeks passed, the tension in our home became a palpable force, like a gathering storm on the horizon. Nathan grew increasingly volatile, his temper igniting at the slightest provocation. It was during one of these outbursts that the final catalyst for our escape plan occurred. "You ungrateful wretches!" Nathan bellowed, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the dishes rattle. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Lila flinched, but I held her gaze steady, refusing to cower. "What exactly have you done for us, Nathan?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. "Aside from making our lives a living hell." His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But Lila's small hand slipped into mine, anchoring me, and I felt a surge of strength. "You think you can intimidate us with your tantrums?" I continued, my voice growing in confidence. "Those days are over. We're not afraid of you anymore." Nathan's face turned an alarming shade of red, and he opened his mouth to unleash another torrent of abuse. But this time, I didn't let him. "Save your breath," I said, rising from the table. We're leaving, Nathan, tonight. His eyes narrowed and a cruel sneer twisted his lips. You'll never make it without me. I'll find you. And when I do. But I didn't let him finish. With Lila's hand in mine, I turned and walked away, leaving him sputtering in impotent rage behind us. As we packed our meager belongings, a sense of determination surged through me. The storm had gathered, and now it was time to weather it, no matter what stood in our way. In the days following our declaration to leave, Nathan's behavior became increasingly erratic and menacing. It was as if he sensed the impending loss of control, and it drove him into a frenzy of desperation. You think you can just walk away from me? He snarled one evening, cornering me in the kitchen while Lila was at school. After everything I've given you? I stood my ground, refusing to cower. You've given us nothing but misery, Nathan. We deserve better. His eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, invading my personal space. Better? You ungrateful bitch. Without me, you'd be nothing. The stale scent of alcohol on his breath made my stomach churn, but I held firm, my heart pounding in my chest. That's where you're wrong, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Without you, we'll finally be free. A muscle twitched in his jaw, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But then a cruel smile spread across his face, sending a chill down my spine. Free? He scoffed. You'll never be free of me, Janelle. I own you, and I own that little brat of a daughter you've turned against me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and I had to bite back the urge to lash out. You don't own us, Nathan, I ground out, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. We're not your possessions. His smile twisted into a sneer, and he leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. We'll see about that. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip, his fingers digging into my flesh. I cried out in pain, instinctively trying to pull away, but he held fast. Let go of me, I demanded, but my words only seemed to fuel his rage. Or what, he taunted, his eyes glinting with malice. You'll run away like a scared little mouse? You're not going anywhere, Janelle, not until I say so. Panic clawed at my chest as I struggled against his iron grip, but it was no use. He was stronger, fueled by years of pent-up anger and a desperate need for control. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, a small voice pierced the tension. Daddy, stop! You're hurting her! We both froze as Lila stepped into the kitchen, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Nathan's grip on my arm loosened slightly, but he didn't release me. Stay out of this, Lila, he growled. This is between your mother and me. But Lila didn't back down. No, Daddy, it's not just about you anymore. We're leaving, and you can't stop us. Nathan's face contorted with rage, and he shoved me aside, turning his attention to our daughter. You little brat, you think you can talk to me like that? Before he could take a step towards her, I placed myself between them, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. Don't you dare touch her, I warned, my voice low and unwavering. Nathan's eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment he seemed taken aback by my defiance. Or what? He sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. I squared my shoulders, drawing strength from Lila's unwavering presence behind me. Or you'll regret it, I said, my words carrying a weight and conviction I'd never felt before. This ends now, Nathan. One way or another, we're walking out of here, and you can't stop us. His eyes narrowed, and he clenched his fists at his sides, his whole body trembling with barely contained fury. For a moment I thought he might strike out in a blind rage. But then something shifted in his expression, a glimmer of realization that his power was slipping through his fingers like sand. With a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Lila and me standing together, our bond stronger than ever. As I pulled my daughter into a fierce embrace, I knew that the tide had turned. Nathan's desperation had pushed us to our limits, and now there was no going back. The time for our escape had come. In the aftermath of Nathan's explosive outburst, Lila and I huddled together, our hearts still racing from the confrontation. It was a harsh reminder that our plan to escape had to move forward, no matter the risks. As I held my daughter close, trying to soothe her trembling, a sudden knock at the door made us both jump. My blood ran cold, fearing it was Nathan, returned to unleash his fury once more. But when I cautiously peered through the peephole, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. Nathan's business partner, Michael, shifting nervously on the doorstep. "Janelle," he said in a hushed voice when I cracked the door open. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I hesitated, glancing back at Lila, who nodded in silent encouragement. With trembling hands, I ushered Michael inside, my mind racing with possibilities. Once the door was closed, Michael didn't waste any time. "Janelle, I know what's been going on," he said, his voice laced with a mix of shame and determination. "The way Nathan treats you, the way he rules through fear and intimidation, it's not right." My heart skipped a beat as I processed his words. Had our struggles been visible to outsiders all along? Michael must have sensed my trepidation, for he pressed on. "I'm not the only one who's seen it, Janelle. There are others at the firm who know the truth about Nathan's behavior, both at home and at work." A flicker of hope ignited within me, even as dread coiled in my stomach. If Nathan's colleagues were aware of his true nature, it could either be our salvation or our downfall. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's gaze hardened with resolve. "We've been documenting his actions, gathering evidence of his unethical practices and abuse of power. It's only a matter of time before the truth comes out and he's held accountable." I couldn't help but glance at Lila, a silent question in my eyes. She gave a slight nod, and I turned back to Michael, steeling my nerves. "And what does this have to do with us?" I asked, my voice stronger now. Michael's expression softened, a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "Janelle, we know what he's put you through, and we want to help." My breath caught in my throat as the weight of his words settled over me. Help, a lifeline we hadn't dared to hope for. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and trepidation. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small flash drive. "This contains evidence of Nathan's misdeeds, both personal and professional. Enough to ensure he can never hurt you again." He extended the drive towards me, his gaze unwavering. "Take it, Janelle. Use it to protect yourself and your daughter, and know that you have allies, even in the shadows." My hand trembled as I reached out and took the drive, its weight seeming to anchor me in that surreal moment. Allies. A concept so foreign yet so desperately needed. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Michael shook his head, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll use it to get away from him. For good." I nodded, resolute determination surging through me. "I promise." As Michael turned to leave, he paused, his hand on the doorknob. "One more thing, Janelle. Be careful. Nathan is a dangerous man, and he'll stop at nothing to maintain his control." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let fear rule me any longer. "We'll be ready," I said, my voice steeled with conviction. Michael gave a solemn nod and slipped out into the night, leaving Lila and me to ponder our newfound allies and the weight of the evidence we now possessed. As I clutched the flash drive in my hand, I knew our escape plan had taken on a new urgency. The storm clouds were gathering, and this time we wouldn't be facing them alone. The weight of Michael's evidence, combined with the knowledge that we had allies working behind the scenes, lent a newfound sense of urgency to our escape plan. Lila and I knew we had to move quickly, before Nathan caught wind of the growing storm swirling around him. In the days that followed, we worked tirelessly, gathering what meager belongings we could carry and stockpiling supplies for our journey. Mariah remained our unwavering support, providing us with a safe haven to flee to once the time was right. "Are you sure about this, Janelle?" she asked one night, her voice hushed over the video call. "Once you leave, there's no going back." I glanced at Lila, who was studiously packing her backpack with the essentials we'd need. Her eyes met mine, shining with a determination far beyond her years. "I'm sure," I said, turning back to Mariah with a resolute nod. "We can't live like this anymore. It's time to break free, no matter what it takes." Mariah's expression softened, a mixture of pride and concern etching her features. "All right, just say the word, and I'll be there to pick you up." With our plans in motion, the tension in our household became almost palpable. Nathan seemed to sense the shift in the air, his eyes narrowing with suspicion whenever he caught Lila and me whispering together. "What are you two up to?" he would demand, his voice laced with barely contained fury. We would exchange a pointed look, then turn back to him with feigned innocence. Nothing, dear. Just talking about school. His jaw would clench and his nostrils would flare, but he could never quite catch us in the act of our preparations. Finally, the night of our escape arrived. Nathan had stormed off after another explosive argument, leaving us a narrow window of opportunity to slip away undetected. "Are you ready?" I asked Lila, my heart pounding in my chest as we gathered our meager belongings. She nodded, her small face set in a mask of determination that both broke and swelled my heart. "Ready, Mom." With trembling hands, I dialed Mariah's number, the burner phone feeling like a lifeline in my grasp. "It's time," I whispered when she answered, my voice thick with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "I'm on my way," Mariah responded, her voice steady and reassuring. "Stay strong, Janelle. Help is coming." As we waited for Mariah's arrival, every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, setting my nerves on edge. What if Nathan returned early? What if he caught us before we could escape? But then a familiar car pulled up outside, and Lila's small hand slipped into mine, anchoring me in the moment. "Let's go, Mom," she said, her voice trembling but her eyes shining with determination. With a deep breath, I shouldered our meager belongings and followed my daughter out into the night, leaving behind the prison of our former life. As we slipped into Mariah's waiting car, I couldn't help but glance back at the house one last time. The curtains in Nathan's study fluttered, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw his silhouette in the window, watching our escape. A shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to let fear take hold. Not this time. "Drive," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Mariah didn't need to be told twice. With a sharp nod, she peeled away from the curb, whisking us into the night and towards an uncertain future, but one that was ours to shape, free from Nathan's oppressive shadow. As the miles stretched between us and our former prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of exhilaration and newfound determination. We were free. And nothing, not even Nathan's wrath, would ever shackle us again. In the weeks following our daring escape, Lila and I found ourselves constantly looking over our shoulders, half expecting Nathan to appear and drag us back into his web of control and abuse. But as the days turned into weeks, and we settled into our new life with Mariah's support, the constant fear gradually gave way to a sense of cautious hope. It was during this transition that the first cracks in Nathan's carefully constructed facade began to show. Whispers of his unethical business practices and abusive behavior started to circulate, fueled by the anonymous leaks of evidence from his former colleagues. At first, the rumors were little more than idle gossip, easily dismissed by Nathan's legal team and PR machine. But as more and more damning evidence came to light, the scrutiny intensified, quickly spiraling into a full-blown media firestorm. "Have you seen the news?" Mariah asked one morning, her voice laced with a mixture of triumph and concern as she handed me a newspaper. My heart skipped a beat as I took in the headlines, emblazoned across the front page: "Local businessmen accused of abuse and corporate misconduct." Accompanying the article was a grainy photo of Nathan, his face twisted in a snarl as he pushed past a crowd of reporters. The caption read, "Moore denies allegations, vows legal retaliation." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, relief that the truth was finally coming to light, tempered by the lingering fear that Nathan's wrath would inevitably find us. "He's not going to let this go, is he?" I murmured, my fingers tracing the lines of his enraged expression. Mariah shook her head grimly. "Probably not, but we're ready for him, Janelle. He can't hurt you anymore." Her words were a sobering reminder of the allies we had in our corner, the ones who had risked everything to expose Nathan's misdeeds and provide us with the evidence we needed to protect ourselves. As the days wore on, the media frenzy around Nathan's scandals only intensified. Reporters camped outside his office and home, shouting questions and snapping photos, as he tried in vain to maintain his crumbling facade of control. "No comment," he would snarl, pushing his way through the throngs of journalists, his face contorted with fury. But the leaks kept coming, each new revelation more damning than the last. Evidence of financial misdeeds, sexual misconduct allegations, and even whispers of criminal activity. It was as if a floodgate had been opened, and Nathan's carefully curated image was being washed away by the torrent of truth. Through it all, Lila and I watched from the safety of our new home, a strange sense of karmic justice washing over us as we witnessed Nathan's downfall unfold. "He deserves it, doesn't he, Mom?" Lila asked one evening, her eyes glued to the news coverage of yet another damaging expose. I hesitated, torn between the desire for retribution and the lingering fear that Nathan's reach might still extend beyond our grasp. "I don't know, honey," I said finally, pulling her close. "But what I do know is that he can't hurt us anymore. We're safe, and that's all that matters." Lila nodded, her brow furrowed as she considered my words. Then a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "I'm glad he's getting what he deserves," she said, her voice laced with a conviction far beyond her years. "After everything he did to us, it's only fair." As I looked into her eyes, shining with a newfound strength and resilience, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. My daughter, once so small and vulnerable in the face of Nathan's rage, had emerged as a fierce warrior, her spirit unbroken by the trials we'd endured. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and forever free from the shackles of Nathan's oppression. His empire might crumble, his reputation lie in tatters, but we had something far more precious: our freedom, our dignity, and a bond that not even his most vicious attacks could sever. As the news continued to document Nathan's rapid descent into disgrace, a part of me couldn't help but revel in the sweet taste of revenge, not for myself, but for the countless others who had suffered under his tyranny. The monster had been exposed, and now he would reap the consequences of his actions, one devastating blow at a time. As the dust settled on Nathan's spectacular fall from grace, Lila and I found ourselves standing at a crossroads, faced with the daunting task of rebuilding our lives from the ashes of our former existence. "Where do we go from here, Mom?" Lila asked one evening as we sat together, the flickering glow of the TV illuminating her pensive expression. I exhaled slowly, pondering her question. For so long our world had revolved around survival, dodging Nathan's fury, plotting our escape, clinging to the hope of freedom. But now that we had achieved that elusive goal, the path forward seemed simultaneously daunting and exhilarating. "Anywhere we want, honey," I said finally, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "The world is ours now." A small smile tugged at the corners of Lila's mouth, and I saw a glimmer of the carefree child she had once been before the weight of Nathan's oppression had stolen her innocence. "I like the sound of that," she murmured, her eyes sparkling with newfound hope. In the weeks that followed, Lila and I made the difficult decision to leave our temporary sanctuary with Mariah and strike out on our own. As much as we were grateful for her unwavering support, we both felt the need to forge our own path, free from the lingering shadows of our past. With the help of the evidence provided by Nathan's former colleagues, I was able to secure a modest settlement from his rapidly crumbling empire. Not nearly enough to compensate for the years of torment, but a start nonetheless. And so, armed with our meager belongings and a newfound sense of determination, Lila and I set off for a fresh start in a new town, leaving the specter of Nathan's abuse firmly in our rearview mirror. As we settled into our cozy apartment, unpacking the few possessions we had managed to salvage, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought us to this point. The strength it had taken to break free, the courage to face the unknown, and the resilience to forge ahead in the face of overwhelming adversity. "Are you happy, Mom?" Lila asked one evening as we sat together on our second-hand couch, the scent of takeout pizza wafting through the air. I looked around our modest surroundings, taking in the mismatched furniture and the peeling paint on the walls. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a life of hardship and struggle. But in that moment, all I felt was a profound sense of contentment and gratitude. "Happier than I've been in a very long time," I replied, pulling her into a warm embrace. Lila snuggled against me, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "Me too, Mom. Me too." In the months that followed, Nathan's name faded from the headlines, his misdeeds and scandals replaced by the next sensational story du jour. But for us, his legacy lived on in the scars we bore, both physical and emotional, and the hard-won lessons we had etched into our souls. I would be lying if I said his shadow didn't linger, casting occasional doubts and fears across our newfound peace. But each time those whispers of the past threatened to overwhelm us, We would draw strength from the bond we had forged in the fires of our struggle. We were survivors, warriors, and above all, a family united by an unbreakable love that had carried us through the darkest of storms. And as I watched Lila blossom into a confident, compassionate young woman, her laughter ringing through our little apartment, I knew that our story was one of triumph over adversity, a testament to the indomitable spirit that had guided us to freedom. Nathan's reign of terror was over, his power and influence reduced to ashes. But from those ashes we had risen like a phoenix, our wings spread wide as we soared towards a future of our own making. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, unbroken, unstoppable, and forever free.
What are you trying to say? I scheduled time in my hectic schedule for this meeting because I was informed that there will be a multilingual speaker there. Many languages. About that, I had not heard anything. Was something incorrect? Mr. Irving was giving a presentation in English, and this was an important business meeting for the future of the company. One of the guests then began conversing in Mandarin. Chinese was not what we had expected, for sure. Is that false information? Wouldn't you stop at nothing to arrange this meeting? It's a trust issue here. There's been a misunderstanding. I was panicking much like Mr. Irving. I had to express myself. I got to my feet and spoke louder. Wait a moment. I'll respond. Naturally, everyone in the room looked at me. Now there was no going back. The greatest moment of my life began with this. My name is George. I'm 23 years old and looking for work right now. My health was destroyed by the corporation I worked for as a recent graduate, which put profit ahead of the welfare of its employees. I was forced to leave. I was raised in a single-parent home and began working immediately after high school since I couldn't afford to attend college. I had no alternative but to quit my job, even though I worked very hard to repay my mother for raising me alone. It's difficult for recent high school grads to get jobs. If I were by myself, I wouldn't give a damn about the work, but I want to help this person. Today I had another interview, but they looked at me skeptically when I mentioned my academic background and past health problems. I sighed as I opened my planner and saw all of the interview appointments. I need to start working shortly. Encouraging my mother's life appeared like a far-off dream. As I got off at the station in the downtown area, I saw someone leaning against one of the building walls. Did the individual feel ill? Some passed by, but none stopped to provide assistance. My mother always told me to be a compassionate person who lends a helping hand to people who are in need. I immediately knelt down by the person. Do you feel sick at all? Do I need to dial an ambulance? Sweat was trickling down her temples as she clasped a handkerchief to her mouth. I was shocked to see how stunning the woman was. She was only a little older than I was. She was most likely at work because she was dressed in a suit. She squinted her eyes and peered back at me. Yes, I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. You don't appear well. Come sit with me on that bench. Are you able to move? In the station square, I assisted her in finding a bench. I gave her a bottle of water that I had purchased from a nearby vending machine. Are you sure you don't need an ambulance? Yes, this happens often, so I'll be fine after a little rest. Is this a common occurrence? This is not the way you should be working outside. What happens if anything major occurs? Kindly look after yourself more. I quickly felt bad for saying that in a hurry. I used to tell my mother, take care of yourself. She put her own health last while working nonstop for me. She used to add, I want to make sure you have plenty to eat, despite the fact that her anemia and overwork usually left her immobile. My mother is the most important person in my life, so I wouldn't be content even if we could afford to eat nicely every day. That's the reason I detested those who overexerted themselves. Well, I guess I can't really talk since I wrecked my own health at my last job. The woman, who appeared much better, laughed and said, I never expected to be lectured. I'm sorry for being rude. Crude? I take it you were concerned about me. I'm grateful. and for also supporting me. No, I'm just glad you're feeling better. My recruitment bag, which I had sloppily set down at the end of the bench, fell down at that very moment. I had taken out my wallet and hadn't closed it properly, so the contents spilt out. There were documents strewn all over the woman's feet, and she began to gather them up with her soft hands. Oh, I'm sorry for making you pick those up. It's all right. Oh. She turned to face me after seemingly noticing something on the documents. Are you job hunting? Yes. Well, more like I'm looking for a new job. Are you serious? You appear very youthful. I mistook you for a college attendee. Although I only have a high school diploma, that would be my age. My former employer was unethical. I discovered that I was narrating my life narrative to an unfamiliar person. I paused when I realized I was speaking to someone who had been feeling under the weather. Oh, I apologize. This doesn't need to be heard. Simply said, forget it. The woman, who was now considerably better, said, hey, got up and grasped my shoulder. Then she said something that caught me off guard. Why don't you come work for my company? What? A few days later, I found myself in front of a highly visible office building. I called from the designated floor as I nervously went through the automated doors. Hello, this is Irving. Greetings, this is George. I just got here. I appreciate you calling. I'll come pick you up. Soon afterward, the woman from the previous day emerged from behind the front desk. Ashley Irving is her name. I'm standing in front of the president of the hotel management firm, which is her. I was shocked when, after assisting her at the station, she somehow scouted me and gave me her business card. Hotel management is a specialty of the Irving Group. They used to manage business hotels, but these days they serve a variety of customers, including both domestic and foreign travelers. Why would they be interested in me? Too wonderful to be true, it seemed. Seeing Miss Irving's face emerge from the main office confirmed my suspicions that it might be a hoax, whether I wanted to or not. I'm really appreciative to Miss Irving for hiring someone like me, who had to quit a firm due to health concerns and lacked major qualifications. I'll give this company my all. Now, Miss Irving is someone I owe a great deal to in addition to my mother. I promise myself that I will not give up, regardless of what occurs. Yes, even if my coworkers don't think highly of me as a mid-career hire with only a high school education. Crying and oblique remarks about my strange behavior started to happen on a daily basis. With so many people from elite universities in the Irving Group, it's likely surprising that there's a recent high school graduate sharing an office with them. Actually, there aren't any new graduate jobs available to recent high school grads. The only reason I was employed mid-career was because I had prior work experience. However, most mid-career hires at this organization want to grow in their positions. Nobody else could relate to my circumstances. My lack of an exceptional academic background and a clear path for career progression must have made me an unwanted presence to the other employees. It makes sense that people would ask, why someone like him? George, were you truly too impoverished to attend college? Yes, exactly. You ought to have applied for scholarships or anything like. I was eager to get to work as soon as possible. That much. For your parents to subject you to that, they must be awful. When they spoke of my mother, I felt a wave of rage, but I knew better than to yell. They could only say that since they knew nothing about my mother. I'd reminded myself not to be bothered by it. Unlike my prior employer, this one didn't overwork its employees beyond laws or deny them time off, even if I was ridiculed every day. I had a lot of luck. I couldn't afford to give up because those around me couldn't understand me. Yet, employing a recent high school graduate when the business is highly valuable. How is M. Irving feeling? Well, she's only the president for now. I'd inclined my head, bewildered at the contempt shown by my senior colleagues. Well, by transitory, what do you mean? Have you not heard? Her father served as president until 6 months ago, at which point he unexpectedly became ill. forcing M. Irving to assume the role of second president. I see. She hasn't developed into a fully fledged professional and is still learning how to manage the business. How soon will she be removed? She is therefore regarded as temporary. The older people laughed a lot among themselves. The staff still didn't trust Miss Irving enough to refrain from making comments like these. It was an emergency, so it was not surprising. I thought back to my initial encounter with Miss Irving. She maintained she was okay, even though it was obvious she felt ill. Maybe the strain and her present situation were making her feel unwell. I would have been devastated much sooner if it had been me. Peace was something I hoped she would find, but it didn't seem likely. I pondered whether I might be of any assistance. Well, then she's going to be replaced as president pretty soon, added a senior who had been listening in on our talk. There it is, after all, a legitimate presidential contender. The real contender, Daniel. Look, that's that manager over there. My senior subtly gestured to a man worker who was having a friendly conversation with his colleagues. He looked like he was in his early 40s. He was young and powerful. Everyone believed Daniel would take over as president before the outgoing president announced his resignation. He was raised for this position since he was a small boy, and his father is also an entrepreneur. Since he is a talented and well-respected individual, everyone assumed he would be the future president. Daniel has the ability to seize any chance that arises. However, everyone claims that because it was so abrupt, the president gave the position to his dependable daughter. Although it's unclear exactly what the outgoing president had in mind, it appears that everyone believed Daniel should be the next in line. It makes sense that they would be resentful of Miss Irving, given how their hopes were disappointed. It's undoubtedly enhanced by the fact that they were peers. M. Irving made assumptions that were unjustified in her criticism, and I questioned how she felt about her work. George, after a month of employment, how is the company doing? M. Irving gave me a call. Since she had personally scouted me, she was probably worried about me. I understand the content of the work. Everyone is still supporting me, but there aren't any serious problems. I didn't tell her that I actually have interpersonal issues so as not to concern her unnecessarily. I did not want to increase her anxiety. I'm glad to hear that. We frequently work with clients from other countries, so I was concerned about the English part. Since I've been learning English, there isn't much of a problem right now. That's helpful to know. I was worried because I found English to be difficult as well. I've always been pushed to learn languages by my mother. It will be crucial in the future, she remarked. It sounds like your mother is an amazing woman. Yes, however, I find it difficult to understand specialized words and commercial English. Everyone initially finds that difficult. Hang in there. It's simply a matter of getting used to it. After all, you work here for us. Certainly. Miss Irving gave a kind grin. George, you're truly inspiring. Are you serious? Indeed. Oh, and I don't think I ever explained to you why I was scouting you. You did mention my excitement and charisma. But how about if I suggested it's because you're my kind? What? My voice cracked at her sudden remark. I had never in my life been popular. I'd never been interested in a woman before. Well, I'm an adult. I thought she was kidding, right? I'll see you later, as I have a meeting now. M. Irving left the office, leaving me dazed. Her comment came so suddenly that my heart was racing. Was she teasing me in any way? It didn't feel horrible, though. After I became proficient in the specialized English, things went more smoothly with my work. I produced documentation in English and effectively conducted negotiations with clients from around the world. I started to like my work, and although it was a new sector to me, I soon developed a strong passion for it. Even the senior staff members who had laughed at me at first because I was a high school graduate started to appreciate my work. You really are quite competent. It had gotten much simpler to work here than when I had initially joined, even if I still heard comments here and there about only being a high school graduate. I didn't know how to react to the compliments from Kevin, the boss of the department. At my prior job, I had never received appreciation or was taken for granted. Should I accept that I still had a lot to learn, or should I be happy about it? This is the kind of situation where you should feel happy. I felt a touch on my shoulder and heard Miss Irving's voice. Suddenly, she was standing next to me. I felt the heat rising on my face from the unexpected touch, but she was merely supporting her subordinate. Was it not apparent to her how beautiful she was? Miss Irving, you looked like you were scolded when you were being praised, so I was surprised. Oh, I'm sorry. You should cease apologizing so easily. You did not act improperly. Yes, thank you. I bowed to Miss Irving and to Kevin. Kevin looked between Miss Irving and me while he scratched his cheek. To be honest, I had no idea what to anticipate when you initially joined, but it turns out that my concerns were unfounded. I seem to have a decent sense of who I want to be around. Having worked for the company longer than Miss Irving, Kevin said, "Indeed you do," with a laugh. Their roles had been changed. He was now her superior. It was awkward, he told me once, but she appeared to be growing accustomed to it. I felt a keen look coming at me as I watched the two of them. I glanced over to see Daniel staring at us. Daniel used to be thought of as the next president, I recalled. I was curious to know his thoughts on it. Did he really want to be president, or was he just indifferent? Well, I shouldn't have been worried about it. It was already chosen who will be the current president. Everyone was finally acknowledging Miss Irving's efforts. The situation would not change at this point. Since we worked in different divisions, I had never spoken with Daniel directly, so I was taken aback when he contacted me one day. It dealt with a significant issue. "George, I'd like you to help me with a project." Me? Being able to help someone from a different department is something I could never have imagined doing, especially after only a few months. However, because Miss Irving had brought me in, I wanted to help her as much as I could. "I am aware of you. I take it that Miss Irving's connections got you the job? You've been putting in a lot of effort and getting results, even if you're only a high school graduate. You seem like a capable worker to me, one who can work well under duress. Please lend your support to the next commercial negotiations." It surprised me. I had no idea Daniel had been observing my work. Sometimes I thought he was glaring at me, but maybe that was all in my head. Of course, I'd be glad to lend a hand however I can. Please lead the way for me. Daniel gave me a kind smile as I bowed deeply. You seem so sincere. Okay, let's work together on this. He gave me a few paperwork. I was in charge of taking meeting minutes in English, taking pictures of the presentation, and summarizing the materials for booklets. In order to prepare the pamphlets, I began by going over the following documents: the clients, the estimated project expenses, the staff involved, and the nations. This project's magnitude and sheer amount of intricacies were unmatched by anything I had ever worked on. I was so anxious about getting ready for this. Miss Irving was at the meeting in addition to Daniel and me. Miss Irving was the company's face, and she needed to be present even if Daniel would be in charge of the discussions. The significance of this meeting just made me feel more anxious. On the other hand, it was a fantastic chance to directly support Miss Irving's work. I painstakingly rewrote the booklets several times, getting input from various staff members until they were flawless. The meeting day finally arrived. I was waiting outside the client's office when Miss Irving and Daniel showed up. Daniel, though, appeared awfully ill. His forehead was furrowed, his face was pallid, and he appeared shaky on his feet. "How are you doing, Daniel?" "What's wrong, Daniel?" "To be honest, I've been experiencing vertigo and chills since this morning. However, I don't have a temperature." "That is very grave. It would have been better if you had called. It's my negotiation, so I couldn't miss it. I'm not going to allow you to lead in this situation. I will carry out the bargaining. You ought to get some rest." "I'm sorry." Miss Irving received his notes from Daniel. "These are my notes. Sorry for the inconvenience. It's not at all difficult. We support one another when we are in need. I'm grateful, George. I'm depending on your help. Yes, Daniel's commitment made me think of my mother. I decided to give it my all for him. Daniel was waiting in a cafe nearby. Though it would have been better if he had gone home, he was too anxious about the meeting to get any sleep. We had to try our hardest to calm Daniel's fears. Although Miss Irving was highly excellent at speech, she had won school speech contests. Therefore, the presentation would be in English. She could manage it nearly as well as a Japanese presentation. I was prepared to take minutes when Miss Irving started the bargaining. Miss Irving spoke in English with clarity and fluency as soon as the meeting got underway. Someone held up their hand halfway through. It was a query. When Miss Irving motioned for them to continue, we were taken aback. It was a Chinese language question. Since it is not unusual for attendees to be from other nations, we held the meeting in English, which is the universal language. Why were they speaking Chinese now? Miss Irving requested if they might repeat the question in English, but she was still not sure what to make of it. The person asking the inquiry gave out a really angry look in response. "Excuse me, Miss Irving, what's going on?" She was pressed by the client's representative. I was told there would be someone who speaks multiple languages at this meeting, so I made time in my busy schedule for this. Multiple languages? Nothing about that had come to our attention. Daniel had made no mention of speaking more than one language. Was something wrong here? The client scowled even more at Miss Irving's response. Was that a lie? No, we didn't say that you would take any action to arrange this meeting. This is a trust-related issue. There was a miscommunication. I was panicking much like Ms. Irving. I felt compelled to speak up, but should I, a new employee, take over? Would doing so lead to further issues? I mean, I'm simply a recent high school graduate with little experience in the field. Ms. Irving's comments, "Don't worry, you're one of our employees," kept repeating in my head. Yes, I work for a company. I'm here to help with this negotiation. Please give it time. I bear the responsibility. I'll respond to your inquiries. In order to stop Ms. Irving from being questioned, I got up and spoke louder. Everyone looked at me, as they should have. In reference to your prior inquiry, I addressed the individual who posed the query in Mandarin. The person asking the inquiry initially blinked in shock, but as I explained, they nodded. Then another person held up their hand. It was in French this time. I answered in French instead. I had trouble understanding the technical jargon, but there was nothing I could do about it, so I tried to explain using motions. Upon responding to that query, the first customer service agent inclined closer to me. "So, you're capable after all." "Okay, I'm sorry. At the end, I intended to conduct the queue and a session personally." "Don't worry. I apologize for disturbing you. Kindly proceed. I'm grateful. Ms. Irving. I'll handle things from here." "Yes, I guess." I was sorry to have left Ms. Irving in disbelief, but I was frantic and did not have time to give an explanation. I answered a question in German after continuing the lecture in English. I used the context to infer the meaning of new terminology before responding and returning to English. The question was then asked to me in Indonesian before switching back to English. Despite my disorientation, I completed the presentation and bowed. The room exploded in applause. "You are very remarkable." Sincerely, I didn't have high expectations, but you truly are multilingual. The president of the client, Mr. Harris, extended his hand to shake hands. He asked one last inquiry, irrelevant to business, as I shook his hand. "But what is the number of languages you speak?" "I am able to carry on an 8-language conversation." "Whoa. Do you find studying languages enjoyable?" "Indeed. As a national interpreter, my mother works. I have priceless memories associated with every language because she used to read me picture books from different places. I worked really hard in my studies because I wanted to be as multilingual as my mother. I understand. We would absolutely like to work with your company if we had someone as trustworthy as you. Many thanks for that. My legs felt weak, and an hour or so later, I exited the office building. Hey George, how are you doing? I apologize. I was very exhausted after the meeting. I was inundated with questions while the presidents were debating the contract. I felt that a lot of the staff were just having fun with my language abilities. They took turns asking questions in different languages, happy to hear their home tongues spoken with ease. We had worked so hard to earn this trust, and failing now would mean losing it. I hoped that the contract negotiations would come to an end quickly because I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. I was free at last, which is what got me to this worn-out state. I was completely exhausted, even if there were no significant mistakes, and I even succeeded in winning the respect of the staff. Daniel suddenly materialized in front of me as I was making my way to the cafe where he was probably waiting. How are you feeling, Daniel? More importantly, the deal didn't seem to go well based on your condition, right? Daniel appeared to misunderstand and shrug his shoulders in disappointment when he saw how tired I was. George, even though I trusted you to help me, this is what happened. So disheartening. Actually, I was mistaken to believe that you were someone Ms. Irving knew. Ms. Irving and I were left behind as Daniel went on talking without giving us an opportunity to clarify. Ms. Irving is also at fault for the failure of such a significant negotiation, he continued. Hold on. What's happening? Daniel, I'm only expressing the truth. You hired him, so you are accountable for this. I will need to discuss this in the internal meeting. No, hold on. A president must be able to make judgments about people. Expect to have your credibility called into question. Daniel seems slightly satisfied, even in spite of his angry words. What made him acting so rigidly? Daniel, did you lie about having many language skills? Ms. Irving gave Daniel a dubious glance. He was not perturbed. Oh, that? Yes, I may have brought it up. It's difficult to get an appointment with that company, so it's worth lying a little to get in. Did they not find it credible either? How come? Daniel lied, which put us in a difficult situation. Getting an appointment in this way is unimaginable. Did you stage your illness to get out of the deal after undermining us with this? How come? It was you who first pushed for the requirement of speaking multiple languages, after all. How come you didn't inform us? Was this meant to lead us into a trap? Not at all. That is correct, really. Although Daniel found the claim implausible, he readily acknowledged it. I wanted to make sure you could manage a situation like this. A president who is incapable is unfit to hold the office. What topic are you discussing? This might have done a great deal of harm. Ms. Irving was correct. The reputation of our business was in jeopardy. We barely escaped a disaster. Daniel, though, appeared unperturbed. In fact, amused. Merely being president has little bearing on one company. Besides, you should take some of the blame for not handling it better. You ought to have shown more adaptability. You appear perplexed. We never claimed that the talks had failed. What? Daniel's jaw fell agape. A preliminary contract was obtained by us. In other words, neither George nor I am at fault. You are the only one having problems. What topic are you discussing? That isn't feasible. You are welcome to verify for yourself if you do not believe me. In any case, the meeting will receive a report on your actions today, so be ready. Let's go. Miss Irving grabbed my arm without noticing Daniel remained motionless. I walked away from the scene. It was confirmed the next day that the negotiations were successful and that we had won a sizable contract. Daniel's activities were also discussed at the same time. Subsequent analysis showed that Daniel had been undermining his colleagues' efforts and then claiming credit for resolving the problems. Even though he was capable from the beginning, he had turned to sabotage others in order to obtain greater attention. When M. Irving was named president, he was certain that he was the legitimate heir to the office. He used devious methods to get retribution. Daniel was fired after his wrongdoings were revealed. He tried to resist even in his last minutes, but Miss Irving spoke to him sternly. "I now see why my father picked me over you. You were capable, but you couldn't value people," he would always say. He believed you were not prepared to serve as president. The outgoing president had recognized Daniel's duplicity. Although I could sympathize with Daniel's displeasure at not being acknowledged for his services, success cannot be attained by stepping on other people. I hoped he would take stock of his errors and move on. I mean, I'm one of those people that switched careers after things stabilized. I received another summons to the president's office. Miss Irving gave me a bow of the head. "George, I sincerely appreciate everything you've done. If you hadn't handled the circumstance, we wouldn't be here. Will you please raise your head? All I was doing was my job. I should be the one thanking you, anyway. You have my eternal gratitude for taking me in. I've always wanted to pay you back for that. You accomplished far enough. The best compensation are your well-earned language abilities and the knowledge you've acquired here. You've come a long way in a short amount of time, and your work is really admirable. I graduated from high school, as you are aware, and my family wasn't very wealthy. I've sadly discovered that life isn't fair, but I've also come to understand that you can improve your lot in life if you put in enough work. I've been working hard for myself, that's all. You're very admirable, so different from me." Miss Irving smiled sadly. "What topic are you discussing? Despite receiving a surprising presidential appointment, you have been putting in a lot of work to improve this organization." "No, I'm not deserving of such recognition. I've abused my position to further my own interests." "What do you mean by that?" "It was for personal reasons that I brought you into the organization. I am therefore unfit to serve as president." She'd never really stated why she scouted me for personal reasons, but now that she brought it up, it makes sense. You were kind to me, that's all. I don't quite follow. I had been making blunders since the morning when we first met, and everyone was berating me and claiming that I was only here because of my father's connections. I felt like I had no allies in the world, and I was at my breaking point. However, you were kind to me despite not understanding my circumstances. I believed that this person might be on my side. I thus dragged you in firmly after learning that you were looking for work. You were only utilized by me. I apologize." Miss Irving covered her eyes with a handkerchief. I felt powerless and had no idea how to handle a woman who was crying. "Used me. That isn't how I view things. You instilled confidence in me. I would never had the confidence to use my language talents had it not been for you. I understood that my work wasn't in vain. Shall I tell it right now? Would doing so be self-serving? I reluctantly find I am brave now. Nothing is more satisfying than lending a helping hand to a woman I respect." "What? Well, I realize this is a bold statement on my part, but no, not at all." Miss Irving suddenly grasped my hand. I sensed that her body temperature had increased. "I used to just use you, but now I respect your generosity and diligence. It looked too wonderful to be true, but this was no accident, George. We achieved this outcome because we had been truthful and hard-working." We then went to see Ashley's father, the former president, who was admitted to the hospital. Ashley's father had become chairman after he had resigned as president, and we told him about the internal problems and the negotiation's success. We also discussed our friendship with him. A decent person for Ashley. As her father, I'm relieved that she was simply concerned with her career. Don't say unnecessary things. It was sweet to watch their father and daughter bond. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that Ashley would enjoy getting to know my mother. I have to start studying management so that I can help Ashley more going forward. These days, my life is about more than just getting money. I consider myself lucky to have the ability to improve my quality of life. It's been said that learning is a lifelong journey. Nothing that is learned is ever wasted. I wish to continue studying a great deal of things in light of that lesson. Ideal for you. She giggled in a terrible, high-pitched witch's voice as I took the seat she indicated. There was a rusty folding chair and a wooden table blackened with mold at the assigned seat. It also appeared almost like a trash dump because of the numerous trash bags from corner stores and the stacks of outdated periodicals that were scattered about. I'd assume she still believes I'm impoverished. For the first time, I realized why she was insisting that I attend the reunion. She wanted to surprise me by calling me there and then make fun of me for being a poor guy, just as in the past. Always, regret strikes too late. That was all it took for me to decide to leave the arena. She could never have predicted that she would soon experience the worst tragedy and hopelessness of her life. My name is Ryan. I'm 45 years old and unmarried. In addition to earning a respectable wage and leading a happy life, my job is hectic yet enjoyable. I was raised by a single parent and experienced extreme poverty as a child after losing my father to illness when I was 5 years old. I had trouble affording clothes, so I wore my shoes until they were absolutely worn out. When I started primary school, even my school bag was a hand-me-down from someone else. My classmates never made fun of me and were always nice to me in spite of that. During middle school, this bond persisted and evolved. I even believed that these lovely days would never end. But I decided to get a job, while my friends went on to high school, of course. After being unwell, my mother was unable to work. She urged me to finish my schooling, but I obstinately declined and entered the workforce before everyone else. I began sorting parts in a nearby manufacturer after I graduated. After that, I changed occupations a few times until landing in my current position. I was left without relatives after my mother died when I was 20 years old. Something happened right when I started to feel like living as a confirmed bachelor wasn't all that horrible. I received a call on my cell phone one day. It came from Tom, a buddy from middle school. Thomas, Ryan, long time not seen. How are you doing? I smiled to hear an old friend's familiar voice. It has indeed been a while. We met at your wedding, isn't that right? Yes, it is correct. I appreciate you returning then. How is the work progressing? Well, it's just okay. I felt as though I had briefly time-traveled back to my middle school days when chatting with my old friend. So, what's going on today? Actually, next month is our class reunion. I am the one who arranges. Are you coming? I take it. I uttered, I'm not sure, remembering a really unpleasant and depressing incident. What's not right? Is Maria Johnson involved? Yes, Johnson was a classmate who harassed me verbally and repeatedly. She came from an extremely rich family. Her father owned Johnson Industries, the biggest business in the area. I must have seemed like the perfect target to someone like her, someone who personified poverty perfectly. She ridiculed my appearance, my possessions, my attire, and occasionally even my mother. One day, there was an incident in our classroom. Look, everyone. Ryan has a cotton pencil case. Where can one ever get something that antiquated? Incredible. Return it. This memento was given to me by my father. Oh, really? Ryan, you can't even get a new pencil case. Mom must not give a damn about you. She wouldn't allow her child to carry such a filthy item if she were my mother. Perhaps she is not very fond of you. As Johnson said, the girls around him started giggling. I gnawed on my lip, unable to speak. She go one step further and threw my pencil case in the garbage. According to my dad, those in poverty are evidence of lazy work. It's also likely that Ryan's mother doesn't strive hard enough. Children are also exposed to that kind of thing. I was the one who was most aware of my mother's laborious efforts. I thrust up my fist, incensed at her for demeaning my mother. Ryan, stop. I would have played directly into her hands if I had fought back, but Tom intervened in time to stop me. Johnson's parents had ties to the school board and were well known in the PTA. Tom was aware that my situation would only worsen if I made a mistake here. I was so frustrated that I had to drop my fist and put it back in my pocket. She simply grew more haughty upon realizing that I wouldn't strike back, and I remained her target until graduation. My only comfort was that, except from Johnson and her group, everyone else treated me like a regular buddy. My mind was filled with bad recollections, and Tom and I were silent for a bit. It's likely that Johnson won't be there because I heard a report that she studied overseas not too long ago. You want to see everyone, don't you think? I can't be certain without confirmation, so please come. My chest constricted at what Tom said. Even while I was excited to meet old pals, I really didn't want to see someone I still hadn't worked things out with. I apologize, but I need to give it some more thought. I got it. I hope you respond positively, but I won't press. Tom, I appreciate you inviting me, I said as I hung up the phone. It was difficult to choose between my reluctance to meet Johnson and my wish to visit old pals. I made the decision to stop at a streetside cafe one day while coming back from an excursion. I walked in the 86 degrees heat, drenched in sweat, and sat down to order an iced coffee. A person seated in front of me spoke up while I was waiting. Ryan? It was none other than Maria Johnson, an individual I will always remember. I froze for a second, then averted my gaze from her. Inexplicable emotions welled up in my head as I thought back on her many tortures. Oh, it's been a while. What a coincidence, I said, struggling to speak, and Johnson greeted me right away. I really apologize for what I did at that time. I sincerely apologize for that. It surprised me that she suddenly apologized. After 30 years, I never expected to be apologized to, especially in a place like this. I mistreated you horribly. I've always wanted to say sorry, but I lacked the bravery. I've heard that a reunion is imminent. I was concerned that you could miss it as a result of me. Johnson had tears in his eyes. She seemed to be really sorry. Up until recently, I was studying abroad in America. There, I volunteered and gained a lot of experience. I was reminded of you by that. Me? Indeed. I felt ashamed when I learned how mistaken I had been. I had to apologize, so even if you don't forgive me, I had to return. I was shocked that she had returned merely to offer me an apology. I was unable to remain enraged at her for going to such extent. It's all right. That was 30 years in the past. I repeated that to Johnson, and his countenance brightened. Are you serious? Will you pardon me? Yes, if you offer a sincere apology. I'm going to let it go. You're really nice, Brian. Thank you very much. How could I have treated someone like you so horribly? I couldn't help but smile at Johnson's theatrical motions as she was speaking. Ryan, it's truly a coincidence, isn't it? Are you a local? No, I just stopped by for work. I see. I continued to reside at my parents' home. That's when I discovered we were not far from my hometown. I didn't give it much thought because I hadn't been back in a long. Well, I must depart. You must attend the reunion. I'm excited about it. Yes, Johnson answered, see you then, and walked out of the store. She seemed really friendly, and even with her advanced age, she no longer exuded that poisonous aura. I whispered to myself that people do indeed change. I got in touch with Tom right away to let him know I would be attending the reunion. The day of the reunion then came. Tom and I headed to the event once we met at the station. Shouldn't you get there early since you're the organizer? It's all right. I wanted to chat to you, so I requested the others to take care of the preparations. Tom and I strolled, chatting about different experiences. I told him about my experience with Johnson among them. That Johnson stated that is unbelievable. Though a lot transpired, I've made the decision to go on. Let's enjoy today then. However, Tom appeared perplexed as soon as we got to the location. That seemed strange. The decorations don't look like what we had in mind. Large teddy bear sculptures, a ton of wreaths suggestive of a store opening, and bright pink tablecloths all decorated the space. The opulent hotel setting was completely out of character for the decorations. It has a rather unique atmosphere, doesn't it? Tom went straight up to another organizer and asked for an explanation. Richard Miller, one of the organizers, then raised his hand. Actually, Johnson abruptly demanded to take on the role of organizer for the decorations. We gave it to her because she assured us she would cover all expenses. It never occurred to me that it would go this way. Nevertheless, we really can't complain because she did it. Richard forced a smile and did his best to support Johnson. I recalled that Richard was employed by a Johnson Industries subcontractor, and that Johnson was the daughter of the president of Johnson Industries, the biggest business in the region. I glanced at Tom, feeling uncomfortable. Then, from behind the venue, a booming voice could be heard. "Ryan Tuffer, I was holding out for you. I have a certain seat reserved for you. Please come on over." Johnson had already taken a few drinks, and his face was flushed. She looked meaner than when she was in middle school, unlike the prior time. A handful of her classmates gave me strange smiles. In the farthest corner of the room, a seat was ready. "Please, without hesitation, take a seat. Isn't that more elegant than the table in your humble abode?" Johnson laughed aloud, while some others feigned courteous giggles in response. "Perfect for you." Her voice sounded like a witch's, shrill and ugly as she chuckled as I took my place at the assigned seat. There was a rusty folding chair and a wooden, mold-ridden table at the seat. It almost appeared like a trash dump because of the numerous trash bags from corner stores and the stacks of outdated periodicals that were scattered about. This is ideal for someone in your situation. I'm really happy that I made you come. Whoa, this is really funny. I assume she still believes I'm impoverished. It finally made sense to me why Mom had urged that I attend the reunion. She intended to surprise me, call me to the reunion, and make fun of me for being a poor guy like he used to be. I tried not to burst out laughing as I considered how I could surprise her. Something occurred to me. Regret always comes too late. That was all it took for me to decide to leave the arena. She was completely unaware that she was going to experience the biggest disaster and despair of her life. I turned to the horrified Tom and said I was going out. Although Tom was furious with Johnson's deeds and remarks, he was unable to just leave because he was an organizer. What led to this situation? Ryan, I apologize. I'm to blame for not being more meticulous. Keep her out of your hair. Let's have fun. You traveled a great distance. Though I was grateful for Tom's sentiments, I had to leave. All I wanted to do was get out of there because I felt disgusted with myself for not believing her apology from the beginning. You're not to blame. Don't stress over it. Even so, Johnson Industries has a significant impact. I could see by the looks around her that a large number of our classmates had stayed in the city and were making good use of Johnson Industries. Putting their livelihoods in jeopardy, they would defy the president's daughter. This worry prevented anyone from criticizing her. That was the extent of the company's power. Johnson turned up her voice to make herself heard as I was speaking with Tom. People in poverty are very pitiful. Are you all in agreement? Her voice was only noise to me now, and I stared from a distance, my eyes frozen. I'll knock her off her pedestal soon, was the notion that kept running through my head. Sorry, Tom. I just realized that I need to get some work done. I'll see you later. Doing work on Sundays? That is difficult. Be careful traveling back home. After saying goodbye to Tom, I quickly caught a taxi back to the office. I didn't have the energy to ride the train home, even if the taxi ticket was $100. I worked alone in the empty office. I had to get ready for a $10 million business meeting that was coming up the next day. I was filled with excitement for tomorrow as I went over the materials. I went to the meeting the following day. I chose to handle it myself, even though the sales representative would normally go. My target, Johnson Industries, was reached. Daniel Johnson, the president, offered me a big smile when I introduced myself at the reception. "It is a pleasure to have you present for the meeting, President Ryan. Let's get started. I'd like to get right to the subject." Daniel seemed perplexed by my abrupt answer. I was so chilly, especially for a $10 million contract, that he must have questioned why. As soon as I walked into the president's office, I declared, "The deal is off." "What?" He seems really startled by my abrupt suggestion. He would be, of course. A $10 million transaction is hard to pass up, even for Johnson Industries. What in the world is happening? Why the abrupt alteration? "We found a company with better terms than yours." I apologize. "We chose to accompany them." "Hold on, you can't just throw this at us without warning." Such a contract cancellation is utterly irrational. Daniel was a snappy person, as I had anticipated. He had a reputation for being obedient to superiors while treating staff members and subcontractors badly. There were even whispers that he would resort to any methods necessary to achieve his goals if they didn't go his way. Your business has a strong presence in this field. The villagers have undoubtedly benefited significantly. Obviously, with $10 million in revenue annually, we are the highest in the area. But our business wants to grow internationally. It is our policy to engage in more business relations with global corporations as opposed to just local ones. After hearing this, Daniel appeared to have a light bulb moment and exclaimed, "My daughter Maria is my secretary, then. She studied in America and has a lot of talent. After all, we are living in the globalization era. Come on, Maria." He gestured to the secretary's office, which was adjacent to the president's office. Before long, Johnson looked worn out. "What is it, Dad? Right now, I'm occupied doing my nails." "Go ahead, Maria. Welcome our visitor. You speak English well, right? Globalization is upon us." "What is that? What is globalization, and why can't I speak English?" A fresh creative. Daniel's expression paled at his daughter's answer. Johnson hadn't spotted me yet. She was still examining her nails. "What are you saying, Maria?" "Dad, why are you being so agitated?" When she finally saw me, she smirked, ignoring her father's words. "Ryan, why are you in this place? Are you here because you're impoverished and want to ask my dad for a job? You know, we don't hire impoverished people." Johnson didn't seem to be realizing how big of a mistake she'd had made. Daniel cupped his hands around his head. I ignored this and carried on. "I appreciate you yesterday. I'm here now to terminate our $10 million deal." $10 million? How on earth did you end up here? As the CEO, I come to let you know that we will not be signing the deal. Was it challenging to comprehend in English? I grinned as I stated. Johnson's cheeks glowed scarlet. She appeared to be aware that I was making fun of her. "Who is this guy, Dad?" "I'm the business secretary, and he's treating me so badly." "Oh, so this is Johnson's secretary. Someone like you being hired as a secretary by a corporation like that had to be quite low level." "I'm especially happier that we won't be signing the deal," I said quietly. "No company that employs someone who doesn't even understand the term globalization has a future." I had a sneaking suspicion that she was probably wasting much of her time having fun while purportedly studying overseas. "Stop being so silly. You miserable loser, are you trying to offend me? Father, send him packing. This gentleman, Maria, is Ryan Corporation's president. Avoid being impolite." "What is Ryan Corporation? What sort of obscure business is that?" Johnson's still glaring down at me, but my next statement made her realize what was going on. "The nail polish you're wearing, the manicure products, even the clothes you're wearing, they were all designed and sold by my company. Stop being so silly. This came straight from France. The U.S. does not sell it. It's sold in France. Yes, we worked with a French designer. You are welcome to verify for yourself." Johnson heard this, took off her gown, and looked at the tag, TKD. Is Ryan the person in question? She was unable to comprehend that I was the person behind the brand she adored, there in front of her. Dad, is Ryan Corporation truly that large of a business? Greater than what we have here? No matter how hard we tried, we were never able to match their level. Now please apologize right away. Daniel nudged his daughter subtly, attempting to read my mind. If she apologized, it wouldn't change my decision not to sign the contract. Last year's revenue was about $100 million, if I recall. $100 million? That isn't feasible. At last it occurred to her that the person she denigrated as being beneath her was actually much above her. This isn't possible. He was so low income that he was unable to purchase a pencil case. Due to his mother's illness, he did not complete high school. How could an individual of that caliber establish a brand in France and earn $100 million annually? It makes sense that it would be difficult to accept. The pivotal moment came when, after middle school, I started working for a company that handled fashion items at a new plant in addition to industrial things like screws and bolts. I was selected to work in the startup division and got to work researching and studying fashion while actively coming up with ideas that worked. Later, at the age of 28, I made the decision to pursue my interest in fashion more seriously. So I left my job to enroll in a language program in France by myself. I studied Western fashion in school, and when I got back to the US, I launched my own business on my own dime. My business had difficult beginnings, but I overcame them by using social media and internet sales to gradually grow my clientele and achieve my current success. My colleagues from my academic days were instrumental in the success of the brand venture in France. Anyway, do take a second look and sign the agreement. I implore you. I say no. Please pardon me now, I murmured as I got up to go. Daniel tried to stop me by clinging to me. Wait a moment. Our business is vulnerable. If you terminate the agreement right away. That's not my concern. I dismissed Daniel icily. Johnson angrily objected, saying, "How could you? How are you treating my father? You're awful." I gave her those words back. You're the horrible one. Johnson was surprised at how aloof I was. I departed the company, leaving the shocked father and daughter in the president's office. I got a call from an unknown number on my personal phone a week later. "Hey, we're about to lose our business. How did you act?" Johnson's harsh voice was his. My number must have been forced to her by one of our classmates. "I have no idea what you're discussing. I should be asking you, if anything. Why do you believe it is my fault that your firm is failing? Avoid being a moron. Did you not terminate the $10 million contract? Obviously, that's the reason. Since then, my dad has been frantically attempting to make things right. We have the right to accept or reject a contract. That is the nature of business." Johnson persisted in berating me, refusing to accept my explanation. "It's not even $10 million. Simply sign the agreement. I'll accept my apology for the last incident, and let's call it even." I decline. I'll never do business with your organization once more. That's all right. Finn. I hung up, seeing no use in carrying on the chat. Then, over the phone, I heard her yell. "Wait a moment." I apologize sincerely. I know I pushed it too far. I simply lost my mind since I was inebriated. I sincerely apologize. Johnson's heartbroken apology was audible to me, but who is really duped by the same trick twice? "I'd heard, Johnson, that you aspired to be an actor. It makes sense why you act so well," I said. She performed with tears and exaggerated reactions, much like an actress on stage. I contacted some acquaintances who lived in the area about her after terminating the lease. She traveled to New York to pursue acting after high school and signed up with a talent agency, but her career never really took off. Fortunately, she didn't have to worry about money because of her family's affluence and could enjoy city life. But because she was 35 years old, the agency fired her and advised her to go a different route. Lost in life, she once more turned to her family's finances and traveled to study in America. She spent her time partying rather than studying. Her parents eventually gave her a call again and offered her a menial job as a secretary, living under their watchful eye. It must be devastating for her parents to see her at 45 and still be so naive and pampered. Why would you say things like that? I apologize sincerely, Ryan. You're quite unkind, she cried. What is the duration of your act? Your organization will not be saved by your apology, no matter how heartfelt. Perhaps you ought to assist your father rather than squandering time in this manner, I replied coolly. I could sense Johnson's irritation mounting as I spoke. Because you became a CEO, don't get arrogant. A revenue of $100 million is nothing. Your business is a tenth of its magnitude. She lost her temper. Enough already. This is something you'll regret. She gave a stern last ring before hanging up. Johnson was undoubtedly furious at the moment. Satisfied to some extent, I went back to work. Tom called me a few days later and broke some startling news. Have you seen the news, Ryan? Accounting fraud is occurring at Johnson Industries. It's on TV nonstop. Indeed, I'm observing it. Thus, it was eventually revealed. The act of a firm falsifying its financial accounts to present a more favorable image of its financial situation is known as accounting fraud. If this is the company's last resort, it is about to fail. My lack of astonishment seemed to be giving Tom something to detect. He said, Did you report them? Obviously not. External parties are unable to view their financial details. An insider must have been the source of the information. I was the one who pushed it, even though the whistleblower was someone from Johnson Industries. Richard was employed as a subcontractor at Johnson Industries and organized the reunion. When I realized this, I got in touch with him right once and urged him to look into the fraud at Johnson Industries. The current condition was discovered as a result of this. The revelation severely distressed Richard, who was always the class president with the most earnestness. For the sake of his livelihood, he had put up with a lot of injustices, but he could not stand the deception of his principal contractor. So he made the decision, with a few colleagues' assistance, to raise the alarm. From then, it was really simple. As soon as the scam was discovered, Johnson Industries was plunged into turmoil. Johnson called me again after a little bit. What should we do at this point? The media is crowding our house, and Dad is with the cops. I can't even go with Mom. You are alone to blame, she sobbed. I have nothing to do with the deception your father did. He did this on his own. None of this would have occurred if you had accepted the $10 million contract. Why do you want to wreck other people's lives? By the end, Johnson was almost in tears. Most likely, this wasn't an act. I apologize for all of it. Please take action to assist us, she begged, sounding frantic. I'm begging you, she said. But I was not going to forgive her. That's why I told you, regret always comes too late. I think she finally got what I was saying. I ended the call after saying that and blocking her number. There was no reason to get involved anymore. After 30 years, I finally got my retribution, and it made me feel a little relieved. The president of Johnson Industries, Daniel Johnson, was then taken into custody on suspicion of fraud. It was discovered that he had cheated on his taxes in order to obtain big loans from banks. The company went bankrupt as a result of the arrests of Johnson's mother, an executive, and other board members as accomplices. The community was rocked by the biggest company in the area collapsing. Johnson, who had always acted haughtily by abusing her father's position, was abandoned and turned into a social outcast. She was left with nothing after selling the firm land and house because she had no one to defend her and was unable to pay back the enormous debts and compensation demands from creditors. It was anyone's guess as to how a 45-year-old woman with no experience or abilities would pay back such a loan. She was ignored by everyone and got no assistance. These must be terrible days for someone who had been at the top. She eventually relocated from her opulent mansion to a modest $350 a month condominium. She began working part-time as a deli cook at a supermarket 5 stations away from her hometown in order to make ends meet. To avoid being identified as the daughter of Johnson Industries, she worked in the rear. She had never held a real work before, though, so she faltered in her relationships fast and left after only a month. She now barely makes ends meet with night jobs and day ones. I questioned if I would have continued if her apology from the cafe had been sincere. Then it hit me. Everything was a product of her own behavior. I terminated the agreement due to a business choice that had nothing to do with her personally, and the company's deception proved to be its undoing. I've been convinced by this experience that people are always responsible for the things they do. She should be thinking back and making an effort to lead a decent life, I hope. In my case, I capitalized on Johnson Industries' bankruptcy by purchasing the site and opening a branch office there, hiring personnel from Johnson Industries. With the building of the new branch and the creation of a new department, I am currently incredibly busy. Tom gave me another call after about a month. We intend to have another reunion. Ryan, you must attend this time. Then allow me to pay for the costs this time. I was considering giving the organizing to Richard. Is that acceptable? That's fine, but were you and Richard that close? Richard actually began working for me as the head of the accounting department after that. I wanted him to work for my company because I respected his bravery in coming out with information against his own company out of a sense of justice. Ryan. No, I mean President. Thank you so much for taking someone like me in. Let's avoid speaking incoherently. As the coordinator, I am depending on you. Let's turn this reunion into one to remember. Richard and I shook hands firmly, and I went back to work excited about our impending rendezvous. My motivation to work increased even further.
You mustn't come to the funeral, my husband Roger shouted at me when he learned that his father had deceased after a long battle with an illness. What wife doesn't attend her father-in-law's funeral? Despite my protest, Roger firmly refused, and I didn't understand why. On the day of the funeral, I sneaked in to observe, and there he was, seated with a woman I didn't recognize at the bereaved family's side. What on earth is going on? Who is that woman? I was shocked and confused, not understanding what was happening, but soon I would learn the shocking truth. I'm Catherine, 30 years old. I married Roger, a 35-year-old office worker, 3 years ago. We don't have any kids yet. Roger often travels for work, only coming home about 3 days a week. While he is away, I devote myself to my hobby of drawing comics. On his days off, we would go shopping together, watch movies, and enjoy our time as a couple. Roger's mother passed away when he was a child, and his father raised him and his sister Sarah single-handedly. In the early days of our marriage, we would often visit Roger's family, a 2-hour drive away. But when his father fell seriously ill a year ago, our visits gradually decreased. Roger told me, "Doug doesn't want you to see him in his emaciated state," so I refrained from visiting. One day, a call came in on Roger's mobile after he returned from work. "Oh, Dad has passed away." Upon hearing that, I stopped preparing dinner. Roger sighed deeply after hanging up. "Was that real? Did you hear that?" "Oh, his condition seems to have worsened suddenly." The one who contacted him was his Uncle Terry. The events leading up to Roger's father passing happened in a flash, and Uncle Terry didn't even have time to call Roger. The funeral would be held the day after tomorrow. Roger seemed quite flustered due to the sudden news. As I was watching him with concern, I softly spoke, but his response was unexpected. "I'll come with you to the funeral." "No, you absolutely can't come." "Huh, why? It's obvious that I should go, right?" Shut up. Just listen to what I say and keep your mouth shut. Roger stormed off to his room, hastily packing his suit and change of clothes. But why? Can you tell me why? Shut up. I'm going to stay at my parents' house until the funeral is over. Just remember, you must not come to the funeral. Wait, hold on a minute. Ignoring my panic, my husband Roger left the house. It's only natural for a wife to attend her father-in-law's funeral. Then why isn't it okay for me to go? I was left feeling frustrated and confused. Unable to let it go, I decided to ask about the location of my father-in-law's funeral. I called my sister-in-law, Sarah, whom I don't usually keep in touch with, but she seemed oddly distant. How come you know about our father's death, Catherine? I heard it from Roger. It's surprising that he has contacted you already. Sarah seemed really puzzled, and for some reason, our conversation wasn't aligning well. But I had no time to worry about that. Roger told me not to come, but I really wanted to attend the funeral. I appreciate your sentiment, Catherine, but it might be best for you not to come. Why? My father-in-law passed away, right? I want to say my final goodbye, please. After my persistent pleading, there was a moment of silence before she responded. All right, but keep this a secret from Roger, okay? Sarah gave me the location and time of the funeral, but she said, please arrive later than the start time and take a seat where you won't be noticed. I couldn't quite understand why I was being treated this way, but I was able to take bereavement leave from work and decided to go to the funeral. On the day of my father-in-law's funeral, as instructed by Sarah, I arrived a bit late at the funeral venue. To my surprise, there was an unfamiliar woman sitting next to my husband Roger in the seat of the chief mourner. Who is she? Why is she sitting next to my husband? In a state of confusion and not knowing what was going on, I quietly took a seat in the farthest row back. Then I overheard the people in the seat in front whispering, "Is that woman Roger's new wife, Lucy?" Poor Roger. His previous wife apparently handed him divorce papers and just left. I could hear voices whispering not only about Roger's new wife, but also about me. There were rumors speculating about me having an affair or being in debt. The shock was so great that I lost all strength, and my heart began to race. I never filed for divorce, and we've never even discussed separation. What does this remarriage mean? I couldn't catch up with the situation, but from the rumors, I understood that the woman sitting next to my husband was his new wife. She looked to be in her early 20s and occasionally caressed her belly, which was visibly swollen even under her loose funeral attire. When it was my turn to pay my respects, I stood up. In the previously quiet venue, murmurs started to buzz. She really had the nerve to show up. What an insensitive woman, I heard as I slowly approached the row where my husband was seated. When my husband Roger caught my eye, his face turned ashen, and he looked visibly shaken. But his new wife seemed oblivious to his distress. Having finished paying my respects at the funeral, I swiftly left the funeral home to head to the city hall, escaping his piercing gaze. There, I took out my copy of the family register where it was written, "Deregistration," indicating that our divorce had taken place 5 months ago. With my hands trembling in fury, my mind went blank. How could he dare to secretly file for divorce and remarry? I will never forget this. I gritted my teeth, resolved to take revenge on my husband. Even after a few days, Roger never returned home, nor was there any communication from him. Didn't he say he would stay at his parents' house until the funeral was over? I was filled with a desire to confront him, but I chose not to contact him, waiting to see what his next move would be. Why on earth would he secretly file for divorce and remarry while living with me and keeping it a secret. There must be something else going on here. As I thought back on Roger's past actions, one by one, I noticed something and quickly switched on my computer. I remembered seeing him typing away at a blog on his computer in the middle of the night. Going through his history, I discovered a blog titled Roger the Dragon King's Wild Diary. There were no pictures of Roger's face, but there were pictures of his car in our home, so I knew without a doubt that it was his. As I read each article he had posted, the details of what he had been planning were written out, and my body heated up with surging anger. Ah, that's it, I thought. With a brilliant scheme in mind to get back at Roger, I called my sister-in-law Sarah and another individual. Preparing meticulously, I couldn't help but look forward to seeing the expression on Roger's face on the day of the operation. I was standing in front of the house Roger shared with his new wife, Lucy. After a while, a delivery truck pulled up, and the delivery man began unloading packages. Lucy came out of the house, and began exclaiming at the entrance, "What the hell is this? Whose packages are these?" "Hey, darling," she called out. "Huh? What's going on?" Called by Lucy, Roger emerged, his eyes bulging as he looked at the multitude of cardboard boxes that had been delivered. "Who's it from?" As he leaned in to see the sender's name, he abruptly began acting suspiciously, spreading his arms to hide the packages. Well, of course he would, I thought. After all, with the sender labeled as ex-wife, there was no way he could keep his cool. Seeing this, Lucy raised her voice. "Ex-wife? What do you mean by that? I've heard nothing about this." Roger didn't respond to her, but quickly paid the delivery fee of $200. When he did, he locked eyes with me, hiding in the shadows of a nearby lamppost. "Hey, you, what are you doing here?" "I got your address from your sister, Sarah," I replied. I turned to Lucy, who was watching our exchange with a puzzled look, and gave her a warm smile. "Nice to meet you, Lucy. I'm Catherine, the ex-wife of Roger, who sent you these packages. Sorry to surprise you. He unilaterally filed for divorce 5 months ago without telling me." When I showed her our marriage certificate, she seemed a bit taken aback. But then she invited me in, saying we shouldn't cause a scene outside. Once inside the living room, I ignored my trembling husband sitting next to Lucy and began to speak. "Lucy, when did you start dating Roger?" "About a year ago. He said he was single. I can't believe it." "Interesting. So he deceives both you and me." "Come on, don't say such horrible things." "Ha, it's just a simple misunderstanding, isn't it?" I was speechless at my husband's nonchalant laughter and his utter lack of remorse. "It's unacceptable that you filed for divorce without my consent. I'm suing you for $30,000 in alimony. You've been cheating, so it's only fair, right?" "Why? Why should I have to pay that?" While my husband was fuming with anger, Lucy, on the other hand, seemed quite calm. "Well, don't be so stingy. Just pay her, darling. After all, you're the boss, so $30,000 shouldn't be a big deal, right?" Hearing that, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Lucy looked at me, puzzled by my reaction. "Who's the boss?" "Roger's been lying about that too, Lucy. He's just an ordinary office worker." "Who? What? Roger, what's going on?" As Lucy confronted him, my husband, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead, began to make excuses. "Lucy, I'm sorry for lying, but when my father died, I came into a large sum of money. His stupidity left me with nothing to do but laugh bitterly." From his blog, which I had found, it was clear that he was under the delusion that he would inherit a fortune if his seriously ill father passed away. He had lied about his identity to his mistress. got her pregnant without showing any signs of panic, and joyfully documented his plan to divorce me unilaterally. When I slapped the printed pages of his blog onto the table, the doorbell rang. My husband opened the door, and there stood Terry, his uncle. "There's no way you'd inherit anything, you idiot." In fact, besides Sarah, Terry was the other person I had contacted. Before entering this house, I had called Terry on my cell phone and had him listen to our entire conversation. "You explained to our family that Catherine left you after having an affair and filing for divorce, didn't you?" "Oh, that." Roger seemed unable to come up with an excuse and started to get defensive. "Just because of that doesn't mean I can't inherit my father's estate. I am his son, after all." "You've been disinherited. That's got nothing to do with the estate." "Huh? What are you talking about?" From what I heard from Terry, Roger was always pestering my in-laws for money. When my father-in-law rejected him, Roger would insult him and sometimes even resort to physical abuse. Recognizing his life was nearing its end, my father-in-law had taken the initiative to disinherit Roger. "Hold on a minute. So you're saying I'm not getting a single cent? I've got debts because I was counting on my father's inheritance. What am I supposed to do?" "That's what you deserve," was all I could say. "If your father wanted you to become a responsible person, that's why he thought it'd be better not to give you any money. Don't you understand his feelings? So give me the inheritance and I'll become more responsible." The more Roger spoke, the more I was filled with disgust, and it seemed Lucy, his mistress, felt the same. "You told me you were a CEO. That's why I went with you. I've got no use for a poor man." "Lucy, please don't say that. Her baby's about to be born." With that, she let out a big sigh and shot a glare at him. "I'll give birth and raise a child by myself. All I need from you is alimony and child support." "Lucy, please forgive me." Roger began to sob, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook. "You'll also have to pay me alimony." "That's impossible. I don't have that kind of money." "Oh, I got it. Catherine, let's give it another go." "What? You had the audacity to file for divorce and now you're asking to remarry? Please, I'm begging you. You can work too. We can repay the debt together. Are you kidding me?" Furious at Roger's selfishness, I yelled back, shaking him off my leg and leaving the house with Terry. Soon after, my ex-husband was served with divorce papers from Lucy, who was demanding $20,000 in alimony and $500 a month in child support. According to my sister-in-law, Sarah, in addition to the $30,000 in alimony that I had demanded, my ex-husband was swamped with debt from the mortgage on the house he lived in with Lucy and was reportedly working like a horse from dawn till dusk. Meanwhile, I was enjoying a carefree single life. Sarah, who used to be my sister-in-law, and I have become great friends. When she comes over to stay, we have a great time chatting. To top it off, a comic strip I drew based on my ex-husband's blog posts has received a phenomenal response on social media, and I'm going to publish it. Excitedly contemplating the title for the comic, I'm enjoying my new daily life. My name is Valerie, and I'm 29 years old. I've been wanting to talk about this since it happened, but thanks to legal issues, I couldn't really say anything until I was cleared to talk about it. Now that I can, I want this to be my little revenge on my mother-in-law. I don't want her to ever come back or show her face anywhere around where we are. This will be a warning against her trying. Let me start by saying that Adrian and I only crossed paths because of our mothers. Adrian's mother, Felicia, and my mother, Veronica, were pretty good friends. The two of them had met up for coffee after years one day, and they both realized that they had single children. They decided to set their children up, and that's how Adrian and I found ourselves sitting at the same coffee shop a week later. Although it was a little awkward that our mothers set us up, we quickly warmed up to each other. We found out that we had a lot in common, like our mutual love for action movies and pizza. We found ourselves so immersed in conversation that we didn't even realize how much time had passed. Before we knew it, the sun began setting on us. We decided to say goodbye then, but promised to meet each other again soon. We met again the next week for a newly released action movie and pizza. We continued to go on dates almost every week for the next 2 months. I found myself falling deeply in love with Adrian. Adrian also fell in love with me, and I could tell because every time he saw me, his entire face would light up. He would pay close attention to everything I said, and if ever I mentioned something I wanted, if it was affordable, he would show up on the next date with the thing. I loved his sense of humor and how attentive he was. I loved how much he cared for me and how much effort he put in for me, which is why I was the one to make the first move and ask him to be my boyfriend. He obviously enthusiastically said yes. We officially introduced each other as a couple to our parents. Both of our mothers were overjoyed and proud that they were the reason we were together in the first place. However, as the months passed, I began to notice Adrian's mother, Felicia's behavior towards me change. Felicia would be cold and distant from me. Sometimes she would make snide remarks about me under her breath. I would ask her why she was behaving that way or why she said something rude, and Felicia always told me that it was nothing, or she would try to convince me that I was making it all up in my head and hearing things. It bothered me a lot, and finally one day I spoke to Adrian about it. Adrian got angry and promised me that he would make sure his mother treated me properly. I was grateful for that. I knew how much Adrian loved his mother, but the fact that he would stand up for me against his mother made me incredibly happy. I didn't know what Adrian had said to his mother because, after that, Felicia treated me like she always had before she changed. I was grateful and enjoyed my stress-free time. Adrian and I dated for 2 years before deciding to get married. Our wedding was a small and intimate ceremony. Only our closest friends and family were present. Shortly after we got married, tragedy struck Adrian's mother, Felicia. Her house had caught fire and had burned to the ground. It happened due to faulty electrical wiring. Thankfully, Felicia was all right and unharmed. She had been out when the house caught fire. Since she had no place to stay, we opened our house to her. She lived there with us for the next year. In that year, Adrian and I experienced great success in our careers. Since we were in a place to start a family, we decided to start trying. Within 2 months, I had gotten pregnant. Adrian and I were overjoyed. We had always talked about being parents, and the fact that our dream was finally coming true made us feel really good. But our joy slowly started fading when Felicia gradually became more controlling. I had been suffering from a lot of morning sickness and cramping. My legs got swollen, and it became very hard for me to do all the things around the house because all of my energy was spent at work. Felicia could not stand that. She would yell at me to do her work. One day, I had come home earlier from work because I was in too much pain. I lay down on the bed and took a short nap, but I was rudely awoken a little while later by Felicia. Felicia began yelling at me for not having done her laundry. I was still pretty disoriented from being awoken from my sleep, so I asked Felicia what she was talking about. "Valerie, why didn't you do the laundry today?" Now I have nothing to wear. Wait, what? Why didn't you do your own laundry? It's not my responsibility. It's your responsibility as the host to take care of that. I'm literally in so much pain right now. Are you trying to start a fight about this? Oh, come on. You're just making a big deal out of it. Pregnancy isn't that bad, and you're exaggerating for attention. You have no idea what I'm going through. It's not easy for me to manage work and the house chores when I'm feeling so unwell. That's not my problem. I was pregnant once also, and I never experienced all this. Get out, get out, get out, get out of the room, get out of the house, get out of my life. How dare you talk to me like I'm faking everything? Who are you? Can you feel what I'm feeling? Get out. Felicia looked scared and quickly left the room. I couldn't believe her audacity. How dare she try to tell me my pain wasn't real? What would I get from faking my pains? At the same time I was yelling at Felicia, Adrian had gotten home from work and he heard me. He worriedly ran up the stairs to check on me. He got there just in time to see his mother hurry and leave the room in fear. He walked into our room carefully and saw me crying hysterically on the bed. He quickly sat down next to me and hugged me. He let me cry for a little while before asking me why I was crying. I recounted everything that had happened with Felicia and how she had been constantly yelling at me whenever I didn't do the house chores. Adrian got really angry and got up to talk to his mother, but I stopped him. He saw my pleading face and calmed down. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I know how upset you'd get. I didn't want you to end up evicting your mother, causing more tension between you two. I felt sorry for her, so I kept it to myself. Babe, I understand why you did that, but I should have known what was going on. I want you to share everything with me, especially when it's affecting you like this. I'm sorry, darling. I should have told you, but I didn't want to cause more problems. You never have to bear these things alone. We're a team, remember? I promise you, I'll talk to my mother calmly about her behavior, and I want you to be there with me for that conversation. Together, we walked into Felicia's room. I was nervous about what Adrian was going to do. I know that he gets very protective of me, and his temper isn't the best. While I'm hurt, I hoped he wouldn't do something he regretted. Felicia looked surprised and asked why we were in her room. Why are you both in my room? What's going on? Enough with the act. Valerie told me everything. You've been constantly yelling at her about the household chores. Well, she should be doing them. After all, I'm just a guest here, right? You could have either done them yourself, or you could have waited for me to do them. You didn't need to bother Valerie like that. It's a woman's job to handle household chores. You would never catch me asking you for help with these kinds of tasks. I don't care about your beliefs. It's my house, my rules. I'm your mother. You can't tell me what to do. This is my home, and if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time you find another place to live. You can't do that. I have nowhere else to go. The only reason I haven't evicted you already is because Valerie asked me not to. But if you cross the line again, I won't hesitate. I promise I won't do it again. Just please don't kick me out. You need to change, Mom. Treat Valerie with respect, like the family she is to us. All right. And so, the rest of my pregnancy went off relatively smoothly. My symptoms were alleviated as I got further along with my pregnancy. Finally, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Adrian and I were overjoyed to welcome our precious daughter into our family. We named her Ava. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days after I gave birth. On the 3rd day, Adrian picked me and our daughter up from the hospital before he left for work and dropped us home. Felicia warmly greeted the three of us. "Oh, look at my precious granddaughter. You've done such a wonderful job, Valerie. She's the most beautiful bundle of joy." "Thank you, Felicia. It means a lot coming from you. Valerie needs some rest now, Mom. She's just given birth, and Ava kept her up through the night. Don't worry, I'll take care of the baby. You go and get some rest, Valerie. I don't want to be away from Ava so soon. Trust me, you'll need this rest soon enough. Mom will take good care of her. You rest, dear. I'll be here to look after Ava." "All right, but just for a couple of hours. Then I'll take over." "That sounds fair. You rest now, and I'll do the same later." "Thank you, Mom." With that, Adrian left to go to work while I went to sleep, and Felicia looked after Ava. I woke up 2 hours later to Ava crying loudly. I got worried and went to check on what was going on. The sound of crying was coming from Felicia's room. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if Felicia was purposely ignoring my daughter, or if she was somehow sleeping through the loud noise.
I knocked on Felicia's door but got no response. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Panic started to settle in. I began banging on the door. After 2 minutes of banging on the door and yelling for Felicia to open it, she finally opened the door just enough for me to see a portion of her face. "Felicia, what are you doing? Let me see Ava." "I'm just trying to teach you a lesson. You can't rely on Adrian for everything. You need to take responsibility for your duties around the house. This is not the way to teach a lesson. Give me my child right now. Complete your chores, and then you can have Ava back. It's time you learn to handle your responsibilities." What is wrong with you? Remember, the longer you take to complete the chores, the longer your child goes hungry. Fear had replaced the anger in me. I was ready to do anything that Felicia asked me, as long as Ava was safe. I didn't know why she was being this cruel to me right after I had given birth. But I didn't have the luxury of arguing about it. I needed my baby fed and safe. I asked Felicia what needed to be done. Felicia told me that there was a pile of dishes to be done, and that the house needed to be vacuumed because it had gotten dusty. The common bathroom also had to be scrubbed clean. Felicia said I had to finish everything before Adrian came back, and that I could not tell Adrian anything about it. Otherwise, she would make things worse for me. I nodded through sobs and left to complete the chores. I sobbed because I was still in pain, but I knew that I had no choice. I spent the next couple of hours toiling away to make the house clean for Felicia. I had to take a few painkillers to stop me from fainting from pain and exhaustion. I also had to be careful not to put any strain on my stitches and tear them. All in all, I was having a tough time, and I kept crying as I did the chores. I wanted to tell Adrian because this was beyond cruel, but I was scared about what Felicia might do to Ava. I was glad that Felicia had managed to get Ava to stop crying, but I was still scared about what the future had in store for us. I just wished that there was some way out of this. The universe had heard my wish, and did more than I had hoped for. You see, that day Adrian arrived 2 hours earlier from work to surprise Ava and me. However, when he walked into the house, he couldn't find me anywhere. He saw the light in the common bathroom switched on and walked in to see me on my hands and knees, scrubbing the floor while sobbing. Adrian rushed over to me and asked why I was overexerting myself like this. At the sight of him, I started sobbing harder. Adrian panicked and pulled me into his arms. He gently stroked my hair as he waited for me to calm down. When I did, I told him about what Felicia had done. Adrian was seething, and unlike last time, I did not stop him. Adrian banged on Felicia's door and asked her to open up. Felicia opened the door and looked at him in surprise. "Adrian, how come you came home early? Did you forget something?" "I didn't forget anything. I came home early because I wanted to surprise Ava and see my family, but instead, I found you trying to teach my wife a lesson in the worst possible way." "Oh, come on. I was just trying to help her be a better wife and mother. She needs to learn to handle her responsibilities." "Help? That was no help. It was cruel and heartless. How could you treat her like that? She needs to learn. It's for her own good. For her own good? Look at our child. You had no right to involve her in your twisted lessons. She's just a baby. I know what's best for everyone, including you. Valerie needs to change. No, you need to change. I won't let you hurt my family anymore. We're done. I want you out of our lives. Adrian, you can't be serious. I thought you cared about me. I did care about you once, but not anymore. You've crossed a line and I won't tolerate it. I will make you pay. Adrian, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. It's too late for apologies. You need to face the consequences of your actions. He silently walked out of her room and gave Ava to me. I cried tears of joy. I just knew that you had to be some type of monster to torment an innocent child like that. Anger swirled within me, and I wanted to make Felicia pay. I asked Adrian what he had done to Felicia. I'm going to file a lawsuit against her. She endangered my child and harassed her mother. I will make sure she pays dearly for it. But Adrian, fighting a lawsuit, isn't it too much? You and Ava are my world. Nothing is too much if anyone hurts either of you. She had no right to treat you like that. Thanks for standing up for us. I can't believe she would go to such an extent to get her way. I don't know what I would have done without you here. It was terrifying. Promise from now on, you and Ava will be safe. I won't allow anyone to harm you ever again. True to his word, Adrian had filed the lawsuit. A couple of days later, Felicia was served of the court summons. Felicia was shocked. She asked Adrian what the summons was for. You endangered my child and harassed my wife after she gave birth. I had to file this lawsuit to hold you accountable for your actions, Adrian. Please. I didn't mean to cause harm. I was just trying to help. Your idea of help is twisted. You crossed a line and now you have to face the consequences for a family. You can't do this to me. Family doesn't give people the right to hurt others. You hurt Valerie and traumatized Ava. I won't stand for it. Please, I'll change. I promise. I won't interfere anymore. It's too late for promises. You have no evidence against me. How will you prove it? I installed baby cameras everywhere the night before Valerie got home from the hospital. I've got more than enough evidence of you hurting my family, Adrian. I beg you, don't do this. I'll do anything to make it right. You had your chance to be better. Now you must face the truth. You broke my trust and I won't let you hurt my family any longer. In the months that followed, things moved quickly in court. Felicia got charged with a misdemeanor and got a 6-month jail sentence plus an $800 fine. When the judge announced the sentence, Felicia broke down and started wailing in the courtroom. Adrian didn't seem to care about her tears, and instead looked satisfied that she got what she deserved. As I watched Felicia get escorted out of the courtroom with handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I knew that for at least the next 6 months, my family and I would be free of Felicia's toxic behavior. Meanwhile, Adrian and I concentrated on raising our newborn daughter Ava and didn't let Felicia's actions define us. We found strength in each other and the support of our friends and loved ones. While Felicia was in jail, she had time to think about what she had done. At the same time, Adrian and I worked on healing from the hurt she caused. I couldn't fully forgive her, but I knew it was important to move forward for our own sake and our families. Felicia finished her jail time and sought counseling to make amends for her actions. I wanted to believe she could change, but I remained cautious and never let her come close to us again. One time she tried, I threatened to get a restraining order. I couldn't endanger my daughter again. Our lives gradually got back to normal. The pain Felicia caused was still there, but we focused on building a better future for our family and cherishing the happiness Ava brought into our lives.